So this is just a sample of lawmakers questioning some of the nation's largest city mayors, including Mayor Johnson, about their sanctuary city status. Paris Schutz is live in Washington, D.C. as well. He has been sitting in on this morning's testimony. They took a little break. They're back at it again. Paris, let's talk about what you've seen so far and how has Mayor Johnson done?
Yes, Sylvia, you just got a taste of what we've been listening to for the last 3 hours. It's expected to go on for another 3 hours. You have Mayor Johnson touting a drop in crime overall over the last 5 years. In fact, Mayors Wu of Boston, Adams of New York, and Johnson of Denver all saying the same thing, that crime has gone down in their cities, attempting to separate the issue of immigration from crime, citing studies that say actually undocumented immigrants commit a lower percentage of crime than naturalized citizens, and the more immigration in a city, the less crime. These are the studies they've cited. But Republicans, just as you would expect, just as we've seen on C-SPAN and the movies, using their time to ask very difficult questions, speechify, Republicans and Democrats alike. Republicans on this panel, like Scott Perry of Pennsylvania, say the sanctuary cities are actually harboring criminals, undocumented residents, and they are purposely not cooperating with federal ICE agents to try and take them off the streets. Take a look at a very tense exchange between Representative Perry and Mayor Johnson.
Reality is, Chicago police officers every single day bond people out at the desks of police stations. Those people could be turned over to ICE if they have a detainer issued, but we are not allowed to do that. It is that simple of a conversation we should be having of why we don't do that.
Okay, so that was actually John Catanzara, the president of the FOP, who is here, I don't think rooting on Mayor Johnson, but observing the proceedings here. So far, a predicted attack on Chicago has not really materialized. In one exchange, Illinois Representative Raja Krishnamurthy lobbed about the largest softballs that you could lob, saying, Condé Nast named Chicago the best city 8 years in a row. Correct, correct, Mayor Johnson said, in true Chicago boosterism fashion. Also, a lot of attention focused on New York City Mayor Eric Adams, Democrats going after an apparent deal with border czar Tom Homan to cooperate more in exchange for the feds dropping several criminal investigations into him. A notable exchange, Adams saying there is no deal, no quid pro quo, I did nothing wrong. Now, Mayor Johnson, that aforementioned exchange with Republican Representative Scott Perry, let's take a look at some of that.
Do you take immigration information from criminals as they're arrested and processed? Do you take immigration information?
Our local law enforcement focuses on getting all violent individuals off the streets of Chicago. Do you determine whether they're here legally, what their immigration status is, as a function of your justice system?
Gentleman's time's expired, but please feel free to answer the question, Mayor.
The Welcome in City ordinance ensures that our local residents communicate and trust local law enforcement to ensure that criminals and crime is being addressed, and that's why violent crime has gone down in the city of Chicago. Thank you very much,
Chair now recognized.
Okay, you know, a little bit of conflation here with Republicans. He's referring to 52,000. There's a difference here. Asylum seekers do have legal status, and those are asylum seekers he's referring to being bused to Chicago. That is different from undocumented immigrants that have crossed the border illegally, as some say. Also, you know, this issue of whether the police cooperate with feds, the mayors make the case they do if ICE has a criminal warrant. So it's not as if there's a brick wall in between the two. And right now I want to bring in Congresswoman Delia Ramirez, representing the northwest side of Chicago. Congresswoman Ramirez, how have the mayors, including Mayor Johnson, acquitted themselves so far?
You know, I think the mayor came here very clear to state the facts. He's defending a city that is a thriving city, as a matter of fact, the 5th largest GDP in the country. And these have been gotcha questions from my colleagues on the right. I mean, this is not a hearing. What you're seeing there is some kind of trial witch hunt against mayors of very successful cities. And I think he's setting the record straight. Chicago is a thriving city, and Chicago is made up of a diverse group of people. And that's actually what's made it such a great city. city.
What about the points that Republicans try to make? They're bringing up these cases across the country of some Americans that have died at the hands of undocumented criminals, and that sanctuary cities are harboring these folks and making their cities less safe.
Yeah, I would say that's absolute BS. First of all, let me say to you, to the family of Lake and Riley, and for those who have been victims of crime, I am so sorry, and that should never have happened, and we should do everything in our power to ensure that safety is obviously a priority for all of us. But they decided to take one or two instances and criminalize an entire group of people. These are women, these are children, these are people that have been contributing to places like Chicago for 20, 30, 35 years and have never committed a crime in this country.
What's at stake here? One of the Republican congressmen mentioned a bill floating around Congress that would defund cities like Chicago if they're spending money on undocumented residents. How much would that mean for Chicago?
I mean, Paris, let me first start by saying to you that over $100 billion, that's actually how much undocumented immigrants working in manufacturing, hospitality, pay to the federal government, into Social Security, into Medicare every single year. These mass deportations that President Trump is talking about would actually impact revenue for the federal government. Number two, let me also say to you that so much of the business fabric of cities like Chicago and New York, our communities, are dependent on immigrant contributions. And so it's going to devastate, because for every single dollar that Chicago sends to the federal government, that gets from the federal government, we send back $6. We actually send back more 6 times than what we get back. And I think that for the federal government, we should be asking ourselves, you're going after the cities that actually fund Social Security, Medicare, and so much of the federal government, when instead you should be supporting them.
Well, the residents of Chicago would say, you know what, you're the federal representative, get that money back for the city.
Paris, I'm going to fight like hell to get that money back. The idea that we voted on a budget resolution that would defund Medicaid when our hard-working Chicagoans are paying into it is disgusting. We, Congress, need to actually exercise our authority.
All right, Congresswoman Delia Ramirez, a lot going on. Of course, you were up late with us watching the president's joint address last night, and now this marathon hearing. Thanks so much for joining us. So, Sylvia, so much going on. A lot of buzz in the nation's capital right now, again, because of the joint address last night where President Trump did talk about enforcement of immigration, how the border crossings have really plummeted under his watch. Some of the Republicans in here saying, you know, all we needed was a new president to enforce immigration law, ripping President Biden's stewardship of this issue. I think one of the most tense moments came from Louisiana Representative Clay Higgins, who suggested perhaps these mayors should go to jail. He's saying they are themselves violating federal law. He's saying federal law supersedes local law on this thing, and these cities have to follow immigration law. So a lot more to come, and we're going to bring it all to you all day, Sylvia.
Yeah, so more questioning taking place right now as we speak, as we look at some video here. But I wanted to ask you, overall, you have these mayors who are answering these questions, including Mayor Johnson. I understand a lot of work was done before Mayor Johnson took that seat. He was getting counseling and coaching from people who have been in this position before. Tell us, what do you know about what he did for preparation for today? Because it's a long day and he's still at it.
It's a long day, and I got to tell you, Sylvia, he hasn't had to talk too much because of the other 3 mayors here and the fact that these Congress members do use their 5 minutes to make speeches. Let's not forget, they are political, and they want to get their pound of flesh, so to speak. They want to get their videos to go viral. And so, yes, the mayor's been here since Monday. He consulted with all kinds of people like former Mayor Emanuel, former Mayor Lightfoot. I'm told the kind of advice he got was, don't take the bait. Don't get into a tit for tat, because this is not a game that is designed for the mayors to win. This is designed for the representatives to get their time in the sun to make their case. And so if you stay calm, that is a win. And so far, these mayors have done exactly that. They have not taken the bait. It's contributed to a lack of so-called viral moments. I would say that moment from Representative Higgins, the Republican from Louisiana, was the strongest, most impassioned speech against sanctuary cities so far, and some of those exchanges. But again, they're not landing a whole lot of blows on Chicago, and I think Mayor Johnson is, protected by the fact that there are 3 other mayors up there who are receiving equally tough questioning from this panel. We'll see what comes of this, and I do think this is going to go into the evening.
I'm curious, when all is said and done, what do you think is going to come from this? What's going to be learned from this?
Well, I don't know if there's a consensus, because these things aren't designed to really come to consensus. It's part of a larger investigation that the Oversight Committee is conducting. I don't know if some Republicans might change their mind a little bit, saying maybe some sanctuary protections are necessary. Maybe some of these mayors say, okay, we could amend this, as Alderman Ray Lopez has suggested, if the police, as you heard Catanzaro say, if they get someone charged with a crime and they know that person is undocumented, maybe they should cooperate with ICE agents and say, look, we got someone that's undocumented, come on in here. There's this whole issue of detainers. That means ICE might send a letter to Cook County Jail saying detain person X in jail because we think they're undocumented. Cook County says, well, we're not really going to do that because they've been free to go and we're not going to cooperate with that. So there's common ground to be had here. There's no doubt about that. The issue is immigration's always been a political football. Do both sides want to find that common ground? Maybe at the end of the day, we'll see. Okay, thanks for that, Paris. And Paris, of course, will be following any developments from the hearing this afternoon. He's going to be bringing us updates on our newscast first at 4 and at 5 p.m.